Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited today to be talking to West Point Thoroughbred's president and CEO, Terry Finley. And Terry, there's so much to talk about, but this little horse called Flightline, where things stand for you today. We're less than a month out of the Breeders' Cup Classic. What is going through your mind?
Well, it's great to be on, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Flightline. Lindsay, I think about him a lot, and everybody in his orbit, we're thinking about him a lot. He's probably one of the first things we think about in the morning, and one of the last things, if not the last thing we think about at night. And I think the industry is really, really starting to catch Flightline fever. So it's a beautiful thing, and I just the vibe and the goodwill towards this horse, I think, is something I've never experienced in the past.
There's so much to talk about with the horse, and what I love is that folks who haven't always paid attention to horse racing, this is a very good reason to pay attention because of the amazing things this horse is doing and could still accomplish. For you, though, I would love to hear more of your story and how a guy from West Point gets into the horse ownership business the way you have. How did that start for you?
Yeah. Well, I always went to the races with my father, and I know I talked to you. Your father was involved in horse racing on the journalism side, but my dad was a school teacher, and so we used to go to the races all the time. And I think about, and I really do. I think about in a '73 when everybody sat in front of their TVs if they weren't at Belmont Park, and they watched Secretariat win the Belmont Stakes and the Triple Crown by 31.5 lengths. And I remember that day. I do. I remember him turning for home, and I was always just so passionate about the horses, and I started to work around them. And in the back of my mind, I went into the Army. I spent 8 years, but in the back of my mind, I always said, if I get lucky, right, someday, somehow I'm going to get a chance to get back into the wonderful world of thoroughbred horse racing. And so, right as soon as I got out of the Army, I bought into a piece of a horse, and everything just started from there. And that was 31 years ago. So today we're here, and, think about the fact that we have a pretty good shot to win the Breeders' Cup Classic is, exciting. It does stop you in the tracks because it just shows you, a lot of changes in the game over the last 50 years, but there are so many more people involved in the ownership side of racing. And it is such a great thing to see people so excited. And, I've seen people that are 75 and 80 years old that they catch the fever. Mm-hmm. And they can't wait to get up in the morning and go to the racetrack and to pick up the racing form. So it's a game for young and old, and it is a game that I think once you catch the fever, you never get rid of it.
So when you caught that fever, when you were talking about being a kid there at the racetrack, what do you remember of what it was that hooked you?
I don't think it was a single thing, because the racing industry offers a person so much, mm-hmm. on the backstretch in the mornings at Saratoga and at Del Mar and at Keeneland. I'm excited to go and to spend a week at Keeneland for the Breeders' Cup the week before the 5th of November. But, you just remember those sights and the smells, and you can smell the horses and the liniment and all the things that go on in the stable, and the people, and the data, and the thinking and the strategy on the backside, right? Then you go to the front side and you add the betting angles and the odds, and all the characters, and you smash all those things together, and you're like, man, I love this game, and I never want to get out of it. And I just think a lot of people, they do the same thing. They look across the spectrum of a business that's very complex, yet very simple, right? You talk about the complexity, you could talk about it for days and days, but the simplicity is that they load up a group of horses into a starting gate, And after about 1:50, the winner of that race is the horse that gets to the wire first. And I just think the purity of the race is the icing on the top of the cake of just an extremely exciting and fun, and I'd say captivating business overall.
I feel like that's something that my dad and I talk about in terms of the similarities too between the horse racing and, for me, stock car racing. I mean, that's part of how I got started in sports, and that's exactly the same thing. It's the smell, it's the sound. You feel the cars just like you feel the horses barreling
Yeah.
down that track. There's something really special about all of it, I think. I'm so curious about the syndication process of horse ownership and how many owners are part of this with Flightline.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good thing is, ironically, over the last couple of years in the thoroughbred business, for any number of reasons, entities are starting to get together. So there are 5 entities that own a piece of Flightline. There's a couple out in California, the Horoneses. There's a farm in Kentucky, Summer Wind. There's another farm, Sienna. There's a partnership, Woodford Partners, and there's a partnership in the form of West Point Thoroughbred. So we all got together on a very, very nice a summer night 3 years ago up in Saratoga Springs, New York. And we got together and we bought what we thought was a colt, a beautiful colt with a wonderful pedigree that we thought could be a really top class horse. So we pooled our resources and we paid $1 million for him that night. And I'd like to say the rest is, the path has been very fun, although it hasn't always been a straight path. And I think you have to come to expect that owning horses. But it's been a ride, that we've been able to take our families on, our friends, and the fans involved in the horse business, right? We've all coalesced behind this horse, and it's, truly special. But, from an ownership side, it just, you have a hard time putting it into words that we've all been so blessed to be a small part of this horse. And I'll be forever grateful that to be able to say in the future, we were a small part of the entity that was Flightline.
What was it when you guys decided and made the decision that night about Flightline that was the reason that you wanted to go all in with this?
I wish I could tell you exactly, right? Because we would just replicate that. But I think it was just right, because then it would be easy. But the game is not easy. It's not easy. And, there are people that buy horses and they'll spend a lot of money if they look at the horse a single time. There are other people that literally spend weeks and weeks, right, looking at data and doing all kinds of analysis. We're probably in the middle.
Okay.
But I do remember this horse. I do remember Flightline. When I looked at him for the first time, I walked around the corner with my bloodstock agent, David Ngordo, who's really at the top of the industry, and it has been uber successful for many years. And he's still a young man. He's in his early 40s, but he's had really top class horses. And I just remember seeing, and I remember my mind telling me, like, that is what they're supposed to look like. And he had a presence to himself and a swagger, right, that not many of them have. And keep in mind, at a horse sale, they're put in their stalls and they're brought out. Every time a prospective buyer comes to the barn, right, that buyer will bring a group of horses out of their stalls. So this was probably on the 4th or 5th day. There are a lot of horses that go in and out all day, and by the end of the day, they're sour. They're trying to tell us, like, "Hey, I'm done. Just leave me in the stall.
Right, I'm out."
Yeah, like no mas, right? No mas. And I remember Flightline. I think we made contact that day. I think we made contact. I know I know David did. Now, it's easy to say now because he's Flightline, but his eye, right, his eye is as beautiful of an eye as you'll ever see on a racehorse. And when you go to the paddock of the Kentucky Derby or the Breeders' Cup Classic, you're usually going to see very attractive horses, but you're also going to see a very smart looking eye that's deep and bright and alert, and they look you right in the eye. And they're a lot like people, right? I don't know very many people that don't, when they're engaging with somebody, they like people to look them in the eye. And there are horses that give you that feeling, like they stand up straight and they basically, they command your attention. And, you know, there aren't very many horses that bring 7 figures, but he did. You know, we went into the ring, into the pavilion that night, and I remember saying to David, and I remember David saying to me, we got to get this guy in our stable. We got to take this guy home. And so we're thankful that it worked out, and we're thankful that there wasn't another bidder that bid $1.1 million, because I think we would have had to keep going. But you know, it was plenty of money at that time.
Yeah.
Now it looks like a pretty good bargain.
So 2 questions. What does the eye look like?
Just
Like color, like it's.
Yeah, it's dark, but it's bright, and it fits. It fits into a beautiful, intelligent, athletic, you know, head and body, and the head fits into the neck. So I'd say, like, you go to an NBA game, and I never saw Michael Jordan in person. I tried to get to him at the Kentucky Derby. I just couldn't get into the same room that he was in. But you know, I bet
you could get in now.
I hope so. I want to meet Michael Jordan. I'd love for him to come to the Breeders' Cup. So, Michael, if you're listening to this, I got you tickets. Come on, man. Come to the Breeders' Cup on November 5th. But, you know, I think people talked about him, like, when they saw him on the court before the game, you know, everybody knew, like, that is the star of the show. And I think when you see horses that really stand out, you know, you can put your finger on the ones that have the capacity and the innate ability and the presence to be top class horses. Now, obviously, the road between the time they're sold at an auction and the time they get to these big races, that's a long chunk of time and effort, and you got to get lucky. You got to keep them healthy. But, you know, when one strikes you like he did to us, and you think about him and you think about him in the days before the sale and the days after, like I'll give you an example. At that sale, we bought another very good horse for $1.5 million the next night. But I remember I kept thinking about Flightline. I kept thinking about Flightline, and I was so excited to send him to Ocala, Florida, to the Mayberries, which is where we send the vast majority of our yearlings. And I was so excited to get the first update, right? Because I really thought that they would be impressed. And I remember talking to the Mayberries, and one thing that they said, right, he had run a couple times. And I remember April Mayberry, she said, Flightline is good for the soul. And that just stuck with me, right? So that was about a year ago, right? He'd already run twice, but you know, Flightline is good for the soul. He really is, because he brings out like an emotion in people, if you own him or not. I've seen him elicit like emotion that we probably haven't seen since the days of Secretariat as a racing industry.
And you mean because of the belief that, because in such a world of uncertainty of racing, is that what it is? The belief that he could be the best that people have ever seen? Is that what that is?
I think it's part of that. I'm not going to sit in front of you and advocate that I know what the full equation is. I don't, but it is, the allure of Secretariat. Like I think about, I'm 58 years old. I was 9 years old when I remember seeing Secretariat in my living room, in my room with my dad. So, that's a long time. And so we're constantly in the business. I think in life as well, we're thinking back to the things that we experience as kids. And so I think that link, right, between the people who are running the industry and who are prominent in the industry, we all remember Secretariat. So I think that's part of the platform where we get that emotion. But he gives it to you, when you're in his presence, and then you see him running, and he really doesn't exhibit like any effort. He just does it, and he does it, and he does it quicker and quicker and quicker. And all of his competitors are behind him, and they're scrambling to keep up. And all of a sudden, you feel sorry for the other horses because they just can't keep up, and they're just in deep water. And then they turn at the top of the stretch, and you have a beautiful, I'd say, majestic animal. And our jock, Flavian Pratt, our jockey, is just sitting on him like a statue. And he wins by 20 lengths almost. And you look up at the clock, and it's as fast as Secretariat. And so everything just kind of clicks together when you put all those things into your mind. And life is about memories, and it's about experiences. And I think about what happened at the Pacific Classic at Del Mar at the beginning of September, and the anticipation of the Breeders' Cup Classic. You just sit back and you talk and you think about how blessed and grateful you are to be in this position.
So what would it mean to have him win the Breeders' Cup Classic?
I mean, for the longest time, sure, we have the Kentucky Derby, we have the Triple Crown events.
Because he didn't race the Triple Crown,
no, he didn't.
Yeah.
Right, he had a serious injury. He got stuck on some kind of nail as a 2-year-old, and he really had a deep and a significant wound to his back end that just took a long time to heal. But he would have been in the Triple Crown events. But really, when you look at it and you look at the horses that have won the Breeders' Cup Classic, I'll offer to you that it's probably a better test of a champion to try to win the Breeders' Cup Classic, because you're taking on all comers. You're not taking on only 3-year-olds when they run in the Derby. Now, they have to be special to win the Derby, obviously, and win the Triple Crown. But when you take on all comers like we're going to do at the Breeders' Cup Classic, I think that signifies you are a top dog if you get to the wire first. So I think that, as well as the fact we know what could happen, what he could do at the, as they go into the far turn, and he could open up again. And if he opened up against these kind of horses, the best of the best, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and the best of their generations, if he did the same thing, I try to be as level-headed and as unbiased as possible, but we could be talking about the best horse that ever lived if he in fact did the same thing at Keeneland in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
And that's so wild for you, because in a way for you, it would bring it full circle to how you really got into this in the first place, or when that spark was ignited. So how are you handling the conversation, the comparison conversation under the surface? Because I know it's fun to talk about, right? And there's a legit chance, as you just explained.
Yeah.
I would imagine that is not an easy task.
Well, no. And it started as he had won like his first, he's 5 for 5, and he's won by a combined margin of over 65 lengths, which is a very long, horses don't usually win by more than a length or two. to win 5 races at the level he's done it by an aggregate of 65 is, I don't think we've ever seen anything like it. And his speed figures are very, very high. They're the highest that anybody's ever seen and ever recorded. There are several different speed figures. But when you see people that you respect and that have written and have studied this business for a long time and are looked at as, they could knock a cherry pie, and they start talking about your horse like in the terms that they've done. Obviously, you feel good about it. But in terms of the comparisons, I'm biased, right? We own the horse, so you're going to expect me to be biased. So my response is, I just appreciate the fact that you asked the question about the comparison, right? Because I think that says it all. No one wants to besmirch any of those horses in the past that did great things and that attained, really high levels of excellence. We've done the same thing, and I think these discussions, even if we win and we have a tour de force in the Breeders' Cup Classic, I think the discussions will go on and on and on, and they'll never stop. And these types of comparisons, they happen all the time in sports, and they're good. They're fun. They get people thinking. They bring generations together, and I think that's what it's done. Is it's also given those horses that have achieved really high levels of excellence in the past. We're thinking about them, and I know people are going on the internet and they're searching for Secretariat and for Dr. Fager and for Gosapper and all the other horses that were like, they were the flight lines of their eras. And I think that's a very cool thing for the industry as a whole, but also for new people that are looking for something different. And I think that's what racing does, is it offers people a chance to get into a whole new world that's fascinating, that is confusing, that has a lot of sizzle. But you put all those things together, and I'll tell you this: we try to bring a lot of people to the racetrack. I can't think of one person over the last 31 years that we've done it that hasn't come to the racetrack and said, I can't wait to come back here. I can't wait to learn more about this sport. That's what our industry does and our sport does. It gives people a chance to experience, lightning in a bottle. It's the greatest sport played outdoors, as we say in the industry.
And you said that right now, in terms of the industry, that it's coming back, you think, in a big way. I think you said the wind at your back, right? The wind is in sails. Tell me what you would want people to know about that, people that aren't so familiar with this sport, and why it is so great.
Yeah. Well, I think one, we've had a shift. We've had a shift in our culture as an industry. And while we all say that we love horses, there have been times in the past where our actions haven't really linked up with our words. Now, in today's world, you'll see, if you took a deep dive, right, the horses that we're privileged to have in our possession and our care, like, they're really well taken care of during the time that they're at the racetrack, but also afterwards. The retirement process, right, especially over the last 10 years, has come, so much more forward. And right, horses are being retrained to go on to second careers and third careers. They can go into the jumping world, they can go into the riding world. There are a couple different disciplines that we've made it so much easier for people to adopt thoroughbred racehorses, and they make really, really good horses that people can be around and can enjoy. And, so it's a win-win situation like that. So the other thing is integrity. Obviously, there are some people that look at our industry and they say, you know, it's not on the up and up. And I can't argue. In the past, right, there have been some issues, but there are issues in the vast majority of industries, especially that involve you know, money and betting. But you know, we've had a couple things, especially in the last couple of years. The integrity of our business and the oversight, right, has come forward in a dramatic way, and I think we're set to see the benefits of the horse care and the integrity and the safety side of our business. I think we're every year, right, going forward, it's just going to get better and better, and I'm so excited for, you know, my generation, but also for, you know, the 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds that are in our business and also are thinking about entering our business in some form, either on the betting side or the fan side or the ownership side. And so anyway, look, obviously we have a lot of work to do as an industry, but you know, you have people who are passionate and they have they're intentional and they love horses, and it all starts with a horse.
So Terry, after the Breeders' Cup Classic, what are the plans for Flightline? Are there plans to retire him?
We haven't decided yet. Obviously, right, he's worth a lot of money as a stallion. And if you talk to him, he probably would be, you know, if he voted, he'd probably vote on the side of, you know, going to Lane's End Farm in Lexington, Kentucky, to be a stallion. I think so. That's kind of my conjecture. But you know, there's a chance that we run him next year, and you know, he's magical. I know he hasn't had a very long career, but you know, it's been a superlative career and a career of excellence. So we're going to decide that shortly after the Breeders' Cup. I don't mean to sound like a politician, but you know, our focus is on the Breeders' Cup, and we'll deal with the next stage and the next part of all things Flightline, like the Sunday after the Breeders' Cup. We're hoping after a very long and fun night after the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Lastly, I love that you said, you know, that he had swagger and the fact that you two seem to have a special connection. What is it like for you the morning of a race with the horse, or when you have your last opportunity to see Flightline before he ever goes out and does his thing?
Yeah.
What do you do, and what is that like?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a quick answer, right? I remember Bill Parcells, who loves the horse business, who lives in Saratoga, and I remember watching his speech at the Hall of Fame, and he centered the speech around his career, and he drew the analogy to the locker room, and the winners are the ones that are drawing the locker room together, and they're not off to the side. So, and they take advantage of the connections. And I do draw the same parallels in the business. Like when you see the really good horses, they're always out in front of their stalls. They're always looking. They're always seeing. I know Flightline, when they train him at 4:30 in the morning, every morning out in California. The first thing he does before they put the saddle on is they bring him out, and they have the mountains, right, the San Gabriel up on the corner, and he looks at the stars every morning. And so, you know,
Like
that's what
looks
we do.
up at the sky, and it's just
Absolutely. Well, you look at some pictures of him, you'll see there'll be some, and he just stares. He stares up at them, and you know, I think about that, and I think about, you know, buddy, you have the shot to be the best ever, or to be known as one of the best ever. You just have to do what you do best in a couple hours. And so, you know, I think overall, he's moved us, each one of us, in a very substantial way. I think probably like a little different, because we all come at it from our different experiences, but you know, we just want him to be safe and to stay healthy, and to to just dazzle us if it's meant to be. And that's really how we're looking at the Breeders' Cup Classic is we know on paper he's the best horse, but you got to run. That's why they run around the racetrack. And we just hope he has a shot if everything, if he doesn't get unlucky, to dazzle, not just us, right? Not just his owners, right? Because we're just along for the ride, but to dazzle the industry and the fans, and to also for the people in the public all over the world, especially now with the interconnectivity of the internet.
Yes,
he has a shot to make an impact in the world and to draw and to be the Secretariat of our generation, right? We're hoping that in 50 or 60 years that people that are 20 and 30 today are talking about Flightline, and the day that they saw either in person or on TV or on the internet, they saw the magic that was Flightline.
Wow, Terry, I'd run through a brick wall. Thank you so much. It was so great talking to you. Great hearing your perspective, and best of luck to you and all of the owners of Flightline. But it sounds like the two of you have a very unique, special connection, which is just awesome. And you're right, it's a phenomenal sport. So thank you.
Yep. Well, it's a total blessing. It's a total blessing, no doubt. And I thank you for the time.
Slipping off pretty now. It's on the roll. Here comes the afterburner.
And certainly up there with one of the greats of all time.
I think when you look at any great athlete, they just make it look so easy.
Airborne. Here is coming up.
I think anytime you see pictures of him, you just think, this guy is a beast.
Flightline sailing away. Flightline all by himself at the top of the stretch with a 5-length lead.
And take a good look at this, because you're not going to see this too often, maybe never again. Flightline, 20 lengths clear.
Oh, what a racehorse!